There are many definitions of Sufism. And it's almost as if every Sufi has his own definition. And you've got to understand these definitions do not contradict each other. There are different perspectives on this incredible reality that manifests itself in so many different ways. Al-Qutb al-Dardir, may Allah give us the blessings of his wilaya. He says, for example, التصوف علم يعرف به صلاح القلب والحواس. I mean, this is an amazing definition. He says Sufism is a science by which we know the soundness, the healthiness of the heart and the senses. So the Sufi also, his or her senses are sound. Taste, touch, smell, hearing, seeing, and the inner senses as well. Imagination, memory, thought, and so forth. But one of the definitions that I like is Abu Hussein al-Nuri, may Allah be pleased with him, who's one of the early Sufis. And he said, Sufism is neither formalized practices nor acquired sciences. It is ethical conduct. It is akhlaq. And that, no one would object to that. In other words, the Sufis, do they have formalized practices? Yes. And do these differ? Yes. And do these change? That's also true. They do change. But that's not what it is. Those formalized practices, they are not the reality of this thing. Nor is it acquired sciences, although the Sufis are the masters of language and poetry and states. But that's not what it is. It is ethical conduct, that you worship God as if you could see him, that you behave as if you could see him. For although you cannot see him, he sees you. And again, this is what you see in the Prophet ﷺ, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that verily, you have the most noble character, the most perfect character. So that's what it is. Muhammad ibn Ali al-Kattani, who's a little bit before An-Nuri, he said the same thing. Sufism is ethical conduct, akhlaq. Whoever surpasses you in ethical conduct surpasses you in Sufism. And this is why also Imam al-Ghazali, may Allah enable us to love him and to learn from him. This is one of the unique giants of all time and one of the great blessings of all ages. But what is it that he focuses on more than anything else in Ihya Ulumuddin? Ethical conduct. The heart, getting the heart right, getting the tongue right, getting ourselves right, learning to live with each other, because that's what it's all about. Where does ethical conduct begin, by the way? Imam al-Ghazali says, in your stomach. You've got to learn how to eat properly and how to drink properly. And you've got to learn to teach your children how to eat politely. Don't throw food, share food, eat the food, don't eat too fast. May Allah give us the ability to begin, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. But he says that thus Sufism is not a system of practice or a body of acquired learning, even of metaphysics or of speculative truth, but it is a way of living right, inwardly and outwardly, and also of being safe, so that when your day of judgment comes, which is when the shroud goes on us, as our brother Shams said the other day, we were talking about the signs of the last day, and he was saying, what's really relevant for you is your last day. When will your day of judgment come? That's really what is of concern to me. So when that comes, are you ready? What was your life like? And this is why also the great Sufi masters, they say that the people who reject this teaching, the teaching of the masters, like Jalaluddin, you can learn from him everything. Then usually they die having stubbornly held to very serious violations of ethical conduct and good without ever having known that. Again, when you look at the Khawarij, whom we talked about, these are people who see clearly what they imagine as the faults of others. They don't see their own faults. They always see the fault of the other. And this is one of the things that we see also in a lot of the Muslims who we may not like to keep their company today. They are arrogant people. They are people who often have no self-consciousness at all, no self-knowledge at all. So we have to learn to live right. And living right means getting the heart right. So it's a rule by which we live, a guideline by which we live. Imam al-Ghazali, may Allah be pleased with him, he defined Sufism and Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, his great biographical work, as the thorough inner examination of religious experiments and of their results in the practicing believer. So again, this all fits in, but it is this ability to examine. And this is why also the Shaykh al-Akbar, may Allah be pleased with him, he has beautiful statements in his work about ijtihad and the sanctity of ijtihad. Ijtihad, as you know, is when we exert our hearts and minds to find the right answers to things. And it is at the very essence of this prophetic religion. This is a religion that was meant to work everywhere. And that can only be with ijtihad. That how do we apply this religion in Java? We mentioned, for example, that when the Javanese began to build their mosques, they made them sacred mountains, which is a beautiful type of architecture. And, in Java, carpets and even a thatch, you can't have that on the floor because it's too humid, it's too hot. They're insects. Some of them are noxious. So they will have just stone. And the stone is cool. And then the way the mosque is built, it will also be very cool, very empty. Air is flowing in it. But the peasants, they work in rice fields. They're rice peasants. They're muddy when they come to the mosque. And so how do you keep them from getting the mosque muddy? And again, we want to be polite. They're coming to the mosque. You don't want to be rude to them. So the Javanese had an amazing solution. This is ijtihad. And that is that the place where they go to make wudu, they have to walk through a pool of water to get there. And they have to walk through the pool of water when they leave. And then when they come to the beautiful mosque, they have to walk through another pool of water, and so do you if you want to get in the mosque. And so then when they come in the mosque, they're really clean. They're really clean. And no one said anything about dirty feet. See, that's ijtihad. And look at the courtesy. Look at the wisdom. Look at the wisdom in that. And then, of course, you have this muddy water, which is going to be very good for mosquitoes. And so put some fish in the water, carp and other types of fish. They will keep it clean. They will eat the mosquitoes. And if they get big, maybe you can eat the carp. So this is the beauty of Islam, that wherever it went, it found a way to fit in perfectly. So ijtihad is there. And you have to also remember that the Sufis are mujtahids. They are blessed mujtahids. But, and this is why they say also, the Shaykh is your book. So you need to be a follower, but you also need to be a leader, which means you need to learn to watch the Shaykh, study the Shaykh, learn about the Shaykh, try to think like he does. He is the book. And then see his ijtihad. Because God wants you, the awliya have a nidam. Nidam al-awliya, one of the great walis of India, as many of you know, is Nidam al-awliya, the order of the awliya. He's one of the great ones. I had the honor to visit him. Nizam al-awliya. What an incredible name. But the awliya have a nizam. They have an order. And at the very root of that order is to follow the Qur'an and the Sunnah. But also adab, adab, adab. To be polite, to be courteous, to give people the benefit of the doubt in everything that you do, in everything that they do. But then part of the nizam of the awliya is that you figure it out. That's why the Sufis, they tell us about metaphysical realities that relate to the heart, that relate to the human body, that relate to the human society and history and other things. No doubt these are among the jewels that Shams Tabrizi, Allah be pleased with him, gave to Mawlana Jalaluddin, that intoxicated him. Like, this makes sense now of all this that you know. You know so much. And now let's show you the infinite, beyond, that never occurred to you, but is there in your heart. So they learn to see, how does God work in creation? How does He manifest Himself in creation? And then they do their ijtihad. What's the benefit of that? Because God loves them, and He wants them to get it. He wants them to figure it out, and He wants to give them a great reward. That's why He wants you also to figure it out, because then you get a great reward. God could just do it, but it's so much better if you can do it on God's permission and get a great reward for it, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So this is Imam Al-Ghazali, his definition. You know, that Sufism is inner experimentation and realization of the proper practice of religion as transmitted. And this always meant for the Sufis that you must put words into practice before you can understand them, before you can unlock them. I mentioned these beautiful verses of Rumi, may Allah be pleased with him, in which he says, you cannot withstand the light of God. It's too much for you. So he gives you beautiful words. And these words contain in them that light, but it's veiled. And slowly, slowly, it unveils itself. It unpacks itself into your heart as your heart grows. So then you come to understand these things in a way that you never imagined you could ever understand. So we say, من عمل بما علم أورثه الله علم ما لم يكن يعلم. Whoever will put into practice what he knows, or she, God will give him as an inheritance the knowledge of what he didn't know. And this is one of the signs of tawfiq. This is one of the signs of God's love and His giving us success. So the Sufis then, that's what they are. They're people of practice. And God forgive me for speaking about myself, and especially speaking about the great Sheikh Muhammad Abu Bakr. I love to speak about him because Adiba is here and she remembers him so well. But this is really all he wanted from us. You know, for 16 years that we were with him, he died 3 years after we left to come back to the States. Practice, 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 practice. In fact, in my case, he didn't want me to get a whole lot of knowledge, because that wouldn't be good for me. It all go to my head. It's like, you get the basic knowledge of what you have to know to do this deen right. Take care of your wife, take care of your family, take care of your brothers and sisters, serve, and do practice day and night. Okay, because you've got to practice these words, and then the words will be meaningful. Thus, these experiments correspond to all of the realities that are taught in the law that relate to divine justice, reconciliation with the decree that God decrees. Our brother Shams has this beautiful book, which I hope you all read if you haven't read before, that when you hear hoofbeats, think of a zebra. I didn't get it quite right, but almost did. But in that, there's this beautiful story of this saint who had an incredibly beautiful, I believe, golden horse. And he wouldn't sell it. And so one of the sultans saw it, and he had to have this horse. This horse was so amazingly beautiful. And Sidi Shams describes its beauty. And he wouldn't sell it. And then the Sultan sends this representative of his saying that you give him a lot of money, as much as he wants. If he won't sell it, kill him and take it. And so the representative of the Sultan goes to him and he says, you have to sell your horse. And he said that the man looked like his own father, so he doesn't want to do anything. But the man said that, I can't remember the words exactly, but God knows best. Whether this is good, whether this is bad, God knows best, but I can't sell the horse. And then, in any case, the soldier says, well, I'm going to go away for a few days. Please think about this. And he tells him, I was told that by the Sultan to kill you if you don't give me the horse. Please, please think about this. And then the soldier goes away. Then, if I remember the story correctly, at night, his son gets on the horse. His son loves the horse. The horse rides with his son, and then it stumbles in a hole. It's a really good horse, so it doesn't trip, but it throws the boy, and he breaks his legs. And then the people say, you see? Why didn't you sell this horse? Now your son has broken legs. And then the news comes that war has broken out. So the Sultan has forgotten about the horse. He's now got to go to war. Even the officer, he can't come back. And all the boys in the village are drafted. And so the people come back and they say, what an amazing horse. Because your son will live to serve you. His legs are broken. And our sons probably will never come back. So, in any case, this is about the decree. And it's a very beautiful story. We have so many like that. And in the Qur'an you have stories like that, in the story of Khidr and Musa. But this is what they get. They get this. And one of the greatest secrets of the Sufis is the secret of destiny. Sirrul Qadr, which is unspeakable. But they say that when you taste that secret, then you'll be happy forever. And they believe in the incomparability of God. They believe in the purity of the Qur'an. We talked about that a little bit, and other things. But they always stress the direct experience of the objects of faith. You've got to live this religion, not just talk about it. You've got to do it. Theirs is an uncompromising monotheism, again, as we said, that links everything in infinite multiplicity to God. I love very much the answer of our brother Shams, Allah bless him, when our sister Banu asked him the question about, do they always dance the same way? I've seen a lot of these and I've never seen them do it differently. But as Shams beautifully said, it's always different. Because no moment is ever the same. God never creates the same thing twice. You are how many different people during the few minutes that you've been here? In every breath, He renews your creation. And although you are so similar to the identity, you still have the identity of Shams Friedlander or Banu or whoever you may be, but you are fundamentally transformed and different. Because God, in His infinite bounty that works in the realm of all possibility, these oceans of non-being, if I get the words of Rumi correctly, He always creates something new in every moment of eternity. So relate all of that multiplicity back to Him, the one and the many. And so I think that that's enough for us to say for right now. I want to emphasize again that Sufism is based on the prophetic law, and it never looks down upon the law. It never takes the law lightly. It may indeed severely criticize those practitioners of the law and teachers of the law who turn it into an empty shell. Again, as it said, Imam Malik said, "Man tasharra'a wa lam yatahaqqaq tafassaq." Whoever lives by the law, conforms with the law, but does not taste the haqiqah, becomes a fasiq, becomes a deviant. And that's almost the same as a hypocrite, because the hypocrite is a fasiq. And whoever lives by the haqiqah, and the realities of haqiqah are an endless ocean, first principles, but first principles lead to infinite myriads of first principles. And we have certain traditions in the world that are filled with metaphysical truths. You can drown there if you want. But if you wear the sandals of the Prophet ﷺ and have that law and get on the ark of Noah, you'll be safe in that sea, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. But the law is very, very important to them. Imam al-Junayd, let's take a few quotations. Imam al-Junayd, who is the Imam of all of us. He is the Imam of the Sufis. He says, this knowledge of ours is erected on the foundations of the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Okay, that's its foundation, and it will never leave that foundation. No Sufi has ever proclaimed the absolute necessity of rigorously observing the law with greater vigor than Ibn Arabi. And he was serious about this. He was not a goofy Sufi. He was extremely serious about everything he did. A master of the law, absolutely. Antinomianism, which means to reject the law. We live in the world of the autonomous individual, and that's essentially antinomian. It's essentially a rejection of law. But for Ibn Arabi and for the whole Sufi tradition, any Sufi who rejects the law has brought about a total rupture between the Qur'an and the Furqan, the inner and the outward. And this is the very essence of destruction. One of the hallmarks of Sunni Islam, and especially of the Sufi tradition, is bringing it all together so that the outward reflects the inward, and the inward goes to infinite heights. Imam al-Sha'rani, who is he's also called one of the Imams of the two groups of the legal thinkers and of the Sufis, and he's also one of the great defenders of Ibn Arabi, may Allah be pleased with them all. He says that it is a matter of consensus among the people of the path, the people of God, the Qawm, the Sufis, that no one is qualified to preside over the path, to be a sheikh, like Mawlana Jalaluddin was, except one who has profound mastery of the religious law. Every sheikh is a faqih, but not every faqih is a sheikh. He asserts that every Sufi, every sheikh is actually the word he uses, is a faqih, but not every faqih is a sheikh. And again, Shamsuddin at-Tabrizi, Mawlana Jalaluddin, these were masters of the outward and the inward. Sheikh Ahmed Zarruq, may Allah be pleased with him, one of the great Sufis of North Africa, he says, there can be no Sufism without knowledge of the law and practice of the law. For the outward rulings of God cannot be known except by means of it, the law. But there is also no true knowledge of the law except in conjunction with Sufism. So he's repeating the same reality. They are the ones who know the law. For there is no valid praxis, there's no valid practice, but with truthfulness and sound orientation towards God. And neither of them is possible but with certain faith. We say again that the haqiqah, the ultimate reality, is in the Sharia, like butter is in the milk, and you've got to churn the butter to get the milk. And there's so many other things said to be said. Maulana al-Arabi al-Darqawi, one of the great masters of North Africa, he said, whoever desires that freedom show him her face. Freedom is a big thing for Muslims. Al-Hurriya. Al-Hurriya. It's said that the great social value of Islam was justice. And who embodied justice in the Islamic tradition? The Sufi sheikhs and the religious scholars, especially the religious scholars who were independent. And this is something very important, because one of the things we hear in this ideological, ahistorical ranting about Islam in the 20th century is that in Islam there was no separation of church and state. Really? Did you ever study about our history? The reality is that no people on earth ever had a more successful separation of church and state than Muslims did. Because from a very early time, religious scholars become endowed and separated from the state and critical of it. The state needs them for legitimacy, they don't need the state. And therefore they always had the ability to be independent. And this is why in the colonial period and the post-colonial period, as Muslims are charmed by this beast, which is the modern nation state, which has devastated us in the Muslim world, one of the first goals of the political tyrants will be to destroy the independence of the scholarly class. Richard Bullitt, who is a great writer about Islam, he writes about this very well in a book of his called The Case for Islamo-Christian Civilization, which is a book, it's very short and you should read it. It's a very good book. But he says that they knew that by removing from the scholarly class its economic and social independence, that the doors to tyranny would be wide open. And he said they didn't disappoint. So we have a huge problem in the Muslim world with tyranny, and more than we've ever had before. And a lot of it has to do with the demise of these groups who are independent traditionally. But freedom for us was also a great value. But freedom for us, as we have heard in our lectures today, I believe Sidi Shams mentioned that, and certainly Sidi Muhammad Isa mentioned that, freedom is to be God's servant, totally. And then He will set you free. And the saint of God, God becomes the eye with which he sees, the ear with which he hears, the hand with which he grasps, the foot with which he walks. He or she does not ask for anything, but God gives it. That's freedom. That's hurriya. And freedom in Arabic is always associated with nobility and absolute commitment to principle. But he said, if you want freedom to show you her face, her beautiful face, whoever desires that freedom show him her face, let him show her the face of servitude to God. And that means having upright intentions, truthful love, good opinion of others, noble character, and careful adherence to what the law commands and prohibits without any alteration or change. Then freedom will show you her beautiful face, and she won't veil it from you anymore. Peace, salam. That's how he ends his letters. So Maulana Ibn Ulaywa, this great saint of North Africa, he's also the sheikh of René Guénon, Abdul Wahid Yahya, Allah have mercy on him, and on Martin Links, Abu Bakr Siraj ad-Din. He said, as for the perfected ones, these are the great awliya, it is known from their sayings, far and wide, that the ultimate reality, al-haqiqa, can never be separated from the religious law, or vice versa. Among these sayings is their statement that whoever realizes the ultimate reality but does not master the law becomes a heretic. You've heard that from me now several times. And whoever masters the law but does not realize the ultimate reality becomes a profligate. That's somebody else's translation. But it's good. Zindiq. Also among their sayings is the adage that the ultimate reality is hidden within the religious law, like, you heard it from me, I heard it from him, butter is hidden within the milk. By turning the milk, the butter appears. Those who have true knowledge of God are not veiled by the outward aspects of things from their inward realities. This is Tawheed. They are not veiled by the outward realities of things from their inward realities. They are veils of power. They are veils of power. Their existence is impossible without the eternal, necessary existence of God, the One, the Real. So they're not veiled by these things ever, nor are they veiled by the inward realities of things from their outward aspects. The outward utterance of speech does not veil them from its meaning, nor does the meaning veil them from the outward utterance. Their feet are firmly planted in both worlds. Their feet are firmly planted in both hadras, both presences, the outward and the inward. And may God make us like that. There's so much more to say. There's not a whole lot of time to say it. And may God bless this gathering. May He bless this beautiful place. This is the land of the awliya. And this is one of the great things about Islamic civilization. If you were to study Ottoman history, Seljuk history, the history of the Muslims of Central Asia, of Spain and Portugal, we created an amazing civilization that was free and that was liberating. And that's not an exaggeration. And in which Jews were respected and Christians were respected. The Jews of Muslim Spain and Portugal, many of them were pure Hebrews. They're very special people. And they attained a level here they never ever attained before that or after that. And they knew that. They acknowledged that. And they had great freedom here. They had great honor here. And all Christians did as well. Every single Muslim city here had a Catholic bishop, honored and respected, who could go to Rome whenever he wanted to. Okay, we never had a problem with that. You're free, you know. And yet, in this civilization here, we've talked about that before. One of the amazing things that Islam did was it did undercut the feudal system. It freed the peasants. And it did that almost without knowing it was doing it. You know, but this land was rich. And always when you study about it, you see that the great Sufis, the people who wanted God, who would live in the mountains and live in caves and journey from one place to another, they could live here very freely. The people respected them. The people loved them. The people benefited from them. And there was this harmony between them and others. When you read the Shaykh al-Akbar, you'll get lots of stories about that, of great awliya that he met in Granada, great awliya that he met in Murcia, and so forth. And this is the way it was in the Muslim world. And we've talked in the past about Islamic globalism. Can we use that word? You know, Ibn Battuta, when he sets out from Venice in the 14th century to go to China, because China is where it's happening. This was the great Muslim economic undertaking of the 13th and the 14th century. Scholars have written about it. The Muslims put together with the Chinese, and especially with the Mongols, the Il Khans, the Yuan Mongol rulers of China and others, they put together an incredible economic system. An incredible economic system that's been studied very well. And of course there is this globalism in which you can travel. On the Indian Ocean, you have the Chinese Navy that will protect you from pirates. And you have Muslim merchants are the main ones that are going. And you have also Europe was part of that. Italy, Provence, what is today Belgium, and so forth. Very, very amazing thing. Ibn Battuta is part of that world. Venice was part of that world. So he wants to find out what's out there. And he and his family set off from Venice. They go on their long journey. You know about that. Ibn Battuta is an alien from the time he leaves the province of Venice. I meant Marco Polo. Thank you. Thank you. That would have been a disaster. Ibn Battuta was not a Venetian, okay? And when Marco Polo comes back to Venice, Ibn Battuta leaves Tangier to make his pilgrimage. And then he will travel maybe 3 times as far as as Marco Polo went. The amazing thing about Ibn Battuta is he's never a foreigner, ever. Whether he goes to Anatolia and is among the Turks and the Persian speakers, whether he goes to China, Central Asia, whether he goes to the Maldive Islands, whether he goes to East Africa, West Africa, whether he comes to Spain or Portugal, he's always at home with his Muslim brothers. That's amazing. But one of the things that we see when we look at that world, that Ibn Battuta gives us a window into, is that in that world, it wasn't just an economic globalism, although it was that. An amazing economic globalism. But it was also a world in which the saints could move with great freedom everywhere. And they did. And the scholars as well. And in fact, people like Richard Eaton, who's a great scholar, he said that was more important than the economics. So we'll end with that. That great reality, which is taking place at the time when the Ottoman Empire is just beginning, the 1300s, that will come to a devastating end in the 14th century. And what is the reason for that? Something we want to pay attention to history. The Black Death, the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague will spread through all of China. Again, in Europe, we tend to be very myopic. We can't be that way. Europeans have got to learn that they're part of the world. And that if they want to understand themselves, they've got to know what the Muslims were doing and what they were doing with the Muslims and what they were getting from the Muslims. But in European history, we read about the bubonic plague as if it were a European disaster in Paris, in London, in other cities. In reality, the Black Death devastated the Muslim world and the Chinese world infinitely more, because it was essentially an urban plague, and these were urban civilizations. Europe was still very, very rural, so the plague will have a bad effect on Europe. There's no question about that. But it has a different historical result. And in any case, may God benefit us from our company. The beginnings are the manifestations of the ends. This is, I believe, it's got to be an incredible beginning. Why? Because we're talking about Maulana Jalaluddin. And when you talk about him, he will make up for all the rest, even though we don't do a very good job. Although Shams and Sidi Muhammad do a really good job. But these awliya, they will make up for it. And we have got to bring this to life, this legacy. We've got to imbibe it. We've got to live it. We've got to know it. This is what the world needs. And Muslims, more than anybody on the face of God's earth, they've got to re-embrace this tradition. They've got to learn this. And as long as they alienate themselves from it and they war against it, which unfortunately is so common today, no good is going to come. And what is bad will become worse. You have picked the way to your destruction. And unless you can have this sense to pull back, then there's not much hope there. We ask God to enable us to do something which perhaps is a little bit different and hopefully quite effective little by little. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضاه وجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى. علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به، واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما، وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما، لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. آمين. Thank you so much.